Section 2. Genie in a cola can. Rohan and Kabir stumble upon a genie while on holiday, but this genie isn't quite as accommodating as the ones they have seen on TV, and the conversation does not go as they thought it should. Rohan's heart sank a little as they got closer to the outcrop. The rocks were steep and looked slippery. The waves gently washed over them. They were tangled, slimy brown weeds all around, and even slimier, rod-like objects sticking to the black rocks. The two got a fright when what looked like a large pebble from a distance unfolded its many legs and scuttled off as they approached. Climbing those rocks wouldn't be as easy as it looked from a distance.
"All right, get searching,"
Rohan commanded. Kabir looked suspicious.
"There's nothing here. And it stinks. Go on, there's got to be something."
The boys spread out searching. In a few minutes, Kabir had found plenty of nice round pebbles and a few small conch shells to keep him happy and completely engrossed. Rohan was only pretending to search. Away from the eyes of his brother, he tried clambering up one of the smaller rocks. It was too slippery, and he couldn't get a foothold. As they rounded the outcrop, the rocks were drier but weathered and coarse. They had trouser tearers written all over them. That gave Rohan some pause. He wavered between the inviting rocks and inviting his mother's wrath. He did not notice that he and Kabir were no longer visible from the beach. And then the purple and green can happened. Rohan and Kabir noticed the familiar tin can at the same time. It was lying in a tiny pool of water between two large stones.
"La Zola! Cola's cola!"
chorused the two as they leaped at it. It was a can of La Zola, their favorite drink, endorsed by their favorite actor in their favorite advertisement on TV, featuring their all-time favorite jingle. And miracle of miracles, it looked as though the can was unopened. Kabir, who was closest, reached it first. Rohan, who was not allowed to drink La Zola because it made him even more hyperactive than he already was, tried to snatch it. The inevitable conversation followed.
"I saw it first,"
said Kabir.
"No, I did,"
said Rohan, and they tussled.
"You can't drink it, it's probably full of seawater."
Warned Rohan.
"You can't drink it even if it is not seawater, so let go,"
argued Kabir.
"Look, there's something gooey all around the lid. I think there's an octopus inside,"
Rohan said, changing tack.
"I'll take a look myself,"
retorted Kabir, who was small and weary, but still pretty strong and determined when it came to wrestling with his brother. The two tugged some more, and all of a sudden, the can of cola came apart in their hands. The boys fell to the sand in shock, Rohan holding up the top and Kabir the rest of it. But it wasn't cola that poured out of the can, or seawater, or even an octopus. It was smoke in long, wispy trails that rose upwards. Rohan was the first to snap out of the shock.
"Run, Kabir! It's a bomb!"
he shouted at the top of his voice. They promptly dropped the parts of the can they were holding and ran for their lives. They must have sprinted 100 meters along the beach, but when there was no explosion to be heard and they raced away, Rohan stopped in his tracks. Kabir, who was running alongside, stopped too. They both turned around to look. In the shadow of the outcrop, where they had dropped the can of cola, something odd was happening. The can lay on the ground, still smoking, but the thick grey smoke did not disperse in the light breeze. Instead, it seemed to be congealing into a large figure of what looked like a giant. For a while, Rohan stood watching, fascinated. Then he remembered that Kabir was still with him. He looked down at his little brother and froze.
Oh no, no, no!
Rohan thought, panicking. Kabir was staring dumbfounded at the smoky figure, and his lower lip had started to quiver, which was the worst thing that could happen. Rohan realized immediately that his over-dramatic bomb cry had really shaken his brother. The poor thing was just following his lead now. Little Kabir was usually a tough cookie. He rarely cried or threw an unreasonable tantrum. But when he did, it was like a sweeping tornado. His family knew Kabir cried only when he was badly hurt or frightened. The sobbing and tears wouldn't stop for hours, and he would often have difficulty breathing. He could only be pacified by their mother, and it would take her long sessions of cuddling and consoling. Rohan knew that if his brother began to cry now, his mother would be very angry indeed. He took a deep breath and, in his calmest voice, proclaimed,
Oh, look! It's a genie!
as though genies were as common as flies and regularly popped out of cola. Kabir's lips stopped quivering. He looked at Rohan surprised. Rohan gave a chuckle for good measure to show he wasn't scared at all.
There are no genies,
said Kabir, growing a little less fearful as he saw Rohan's apparent cheerness.
So it's not a bomb and it's not a genie,
said Rohan, thanking his stars. The genie part had come to him on the spur of the moment, and it was an idea so absurd that it had stopped his brother from crying. Of course there are no genies, he told himself. So what was that thing then?
Maybe someone filled a cola can with tear gas,
Rohan mumbled, although it sounded pretty stupid even as he said that.
Let's go look,
he added, beginning to get very curious.
Is that a good idea? Won't it sting our eyes?
Asked Kabir.
We won't get too close.
They ran some way and then inched closer with caution. The smoke was still swirling out of the can, but in ever-thinning wisps, as though the dregs were pouring out. Although Rohan did not want to admit it, the figure the smoke made still looked like a very large man with his back to them. It was not spreading out in the sea breeze like smoke should have. Rohan was beginning to feel uneasy, but he was even more afraid of showing his fear in front of his brother. He decided it was time to end the adventure and go back to the resort.
All right, it's probably some weird smoky chemical. Let's not mess with it,
Rohan said, keeping his voice light and casual.
It's definitely not a genie, ha ha.
Excuse me,
Came a booming, raspy voice from the top regions of the thick smoke.
it is most definitely a genie. Who says otherwise?
The smoke swirled as the large figure flamboyantly turned around to face the boys. He was about 3 times taller than an average human, with a large turbaned head, a long handlebar mustache, a frown on his grey face, and huge, muscled arms folded in disapproval. It was a genie, all right, and he was looking to quell the human who had dared to call him a weird chemical with one look from his smoky grey eyes. Except there was no one at eye level. The genie looked down and took stock of the 2 little faces raised up to his 2 heads with masses of black hair very nearly standing on end. The genie's voice had been simply one surprise too many for Rohan and Kabir. Their legs had given away, and they had both sunk to the beach sand. They were looking up stupidly at the giant, the shock having dissipated any fear they felt.
Oh,
It was the genie's turn to be surprised. Then, without any warning, he shrunk until he was roughly at eye level with them. The 2 boys still stared at him, open-mouthed. The genie dragged his wispy tail out of the cola can and it took on the shape of a pair of legs in pointy boots. He squatted patiently in front of them. The genie was quite used to humans reacting like the two boys had done. He would usually wait until they snapped out of it. But these two were younger and smaller than the ones he usually met. The last time he had been summoned by a gang of teenagers out fishing or despoiling nature, as he liked to think of it. He shuddered at the memory of that experience. They were the ones who had bottled him up in a tin can and sealed it with chewing gum. It had been unbearably stuffy inside. The genie was quite relieved to be out, although not as happy about being summoned again so soon. As Rohan and Kabir continued to stare at him speechlessly, the genie sized up his new masters. The little one was really little, and the big one was long and gangly. The genie had a sudden unpleasant feeling.
Are you a teenager?
He asked Rohan.
Not yet. I'm only 12.
Replied Rohan, who was beginning to get over his initial shock. Up close, the genie seemed more solid and clearly defined in form, but he was still smoky grey and a bit scary to look at. Although Rohan noticed, his demeanour was quite non-threatening, and he seemed calm, almost bored.
That's all right then,
said the genie and went quiet again.
Are you really a genie?
Asked Rohan in disbelief.
What have I been telling you? Why aren't you blue?
Piped up a small, awestruck voice at Rohan's side.
And can you turn into a piano or a tractor? And can you fly magic carpets? And can you...
Does this one watch too much TV?
The genie asked Rohan, pointing to Kabir.
He does. All the time.
Said Rohan.
Not good for your eyes, you know. Or your brains.
The genie said gently to Kabir, tapping his own head. Kabir nodded, his mouth still open.
Do you grant wishes?
Asked Rohan.
Ooh, the lad is quick.
Thought the genie. He had come straight to the point. He said shiftily.
I might, in some cases, depending on the circumstances. It's not always advisable, you know, asking for wishes. People ask for all sorts of things that are not good for them and get into trouble.
So you do grant wishes then?
Rohan persisted.
That'll be 3 each for the 2.
The genie threw back his head and laughed a deep, throaty laugh that rose from his belly, travelled up his windpipe, and came out like cannon fire. He continued snorting for about half a minute.
You are a funny boy,
he said as he pretended to wipe tears of mirth from his face.
No, you don't get 3 wishes each,
the genie said, readjusting the face into a serious expression.
Well, how many do we get?
Asked Rohan, offended by the laughter. The genie thought for a while.
I'll grant you 1 between the 2 of you.
Ha! Never heard of a genie that granted only 1 wish. 3 is standard.
3 is the standard for adults, isn't it? Not even a teen. And this one here,
he said, pointing to Kabir,
is still a toddler.
He's not a toddler. He's 8,
said Rohan testily.
And we'll take 3 wishes each, thank you.
No, son. You don't each get 3 wishes. Haven't I made that clear?
The genie said.
Last time I got summoned by a group of 9 teenage boys. If I had granted them all 3 wishes each, it would have meant the end of the world. Moreover, the wishes are granted only to the finder. Which one of you is that?
Well, I saw the can first,
began Rohan. Kabir, who had been silent up till now, quickly shot back with,
No, I did.
All right, same old story. Tell you what, I'll grant you a wish each,
said the genie.
3 wishes between the 2 of us.
Shot back Rohan.
2.5, and that's final. Take it or leave it,
said the genie in the manner of a seasoned haggler.
Half? How do you even grant half a wish?
asked Rohan.
You'll know.
Said the genie airily.
So, do you want them or not?
All right,
Said Rohan. Before he could say anything more, the genie went all serious-faced.
Choose wisely.
He said,
I will not tell you what you can and cannot wish for. But you must know there are rules. I'm fairly generous, but if you ask for something that is impossible for me to grant, you will forfeit your wish.
This came as a bit of a dampener to Rohan, whose brain was already busy working up some fantastic wishes.
Right. Who's going first?
Asked the genie.
we need to consult, okay?
Said Rohan, drawing Kabir to one side.
By all means.
Said the genie.
But you will not tell the other what you're going to wish for, or tell them what to wish for. That's an automatic forfeit.
You just made that up.
Protested Rohan.
Rules are rules.
Said the genie cheerfully.
Kabir, do you want to go first?
Rohan asked his brother as they put their heads together to consult. Kabir nodded, his eyes bright.
I'll take the next one, and then we will make the half wish together.
Said Rohan.
Don't ask for something silly, okay?
He warned his brother.
I won't.
Said Kabir. Rohan could see his little brother was breathless with excitement and began to regret giving him the chance to wish first.
All right. We are ready. What do we do?
An extract from Genie on a Holiday by Liji Ravindran. Liji Ravindran switched to a teaching career after a long stint as a journalist.